there was an Indian tribe who came to their chief. He was a new chief. He was a young chief. He was a modern chief. He wasn't so familiar with the ways of the tradition. And winter was coming. So the Indians came to the chief and they said, "Chief, is it going to be a cold winter?" So he told them, "Well, for the time being, start gathering firewood, and I'll let you know soon." So he's trying to buy some time because he really didn't know how to figure it out. What he did is, while they were gathering firewood, he ran off the reservation and he called the National Weather Service. And he asked them, "Is it going to be a cold winter?" And they said, "Yes, yes. All indications are showing it's going to be a cold winter." So he came back to the reservation the next day. They said, "Chief, you said you would let us know. Is it going to be a cold winter?" He says, "Yes, actually colder than I even thought. Gather more firewood." So the Indians went off and they gathered more firewood. And while they were gathering firewood, the chief ran off the reservation. He called the National Weather Service again to double check. He asked them, "Is it going to be a cold winter?" They said, "Oh yes, it's going to be a very cold winter, even colder than we expected." And he comes back to the reservation. The Indians come back from gathering the wood. They say, "Chief, what do you say? What's going to be the winter?" He says, "You know what? It's going to be even colder than I thought. You should gather even more firewood." So the next day they went out and they gathered even more firewood. And as they were doing it, he ran off the reservation to check again with the National Weather Service. He says, "What's it going to be the winter?" They said, "It's going to be really super, super cold." He said, "How do you know?" The National Weather Service guy says, "What, are you kidding? The Indians are gathering firewood like crazy." Okay, so this week, Parshas Vayikra is the beginning of a new Sefer Vayikra, the third of the 5 books of Moses. And this entire book deals primarily with the korbanos, with the sacrificial offerings that were brought in the Beis HaMikdash in the Holy Temple. One of the offerings is called a mincha. Mincha is a flour offering, as opposed to being brought from an animal or a bird. A mincha is brought from flour like made from grain, from wheat. So regarding this korban, it says, "V'nefesh," means a soul, or in this case a person, "ki sakriv korban mincha laHashem," when he will bring a korban mincha to Hashem. What is korban mincha? Korban means a sacrifice or an offering. All the offerings are called korbanos. Mincha is a special kind of offering, like we mentioned, flour offering. A korban mincha is a flour offering. That's like, did you go to the ATM machine? ATM machine, right? ATM is automatic teller machine. So it's automatic teller machine. Or do you know your PIN number? Right? Personal identification number. Or, we by Yidden we do this. Pass me the Mayim Achreinim Wasser. Mayim Achreinim already means the last water. It's the water that you do after the meal. Mayim Achreinim Wasser. So is pass me the final water. Okay. So korban mincha means flour offering. Why does that say offering? A mincha is an offering. Okay. So Teiras Kehanim, that's a medrash on Sefer Vayikra, comes and explains that the word korban is not superfluous. God forbid, no word in Torah is superfluous. Every word has meaning, and words that appear to be extra and not extra, they're there to teach us something. And in this case, what does this seemingly extra word come to teach us? It comes to teach us that in addition to bringing conventional offerings, the offerings that we know about, that the Torah speaks about clearly, the different sacrifices, there are other offerings that are not officially offerings, but if somebody is so moved to be generous, they can come and donate these things to the Beis HaMikdash, to the temple. And that is, they can come and donate oil, wine, incense, and wood. If they want to come and donate something to help out, the sacrifices in the temple, so they can bring oil, wine, incense, and wood. Now, that's what the Kahanim, the Medrash says. Let me ask you a question. From these four things, which one of them is unlike the other three? Oil, wine, incense, and wood. Oil, wine, and incense all are included as part of an offering. They all go on the altar. They go on the Mizbeach. The wood is not part of an offering. The wood is just there to make a fire so you can burn the offering. So the wood is sort of like the odd man out. It's different than the other three. It's not actually part of an actual korban. It facilitates a korban, but let me put it in words that might be more accessible or more relatable. Let's say a bunch of guys get together to make a barbecue, and somebody brings the meat, and somebody brings the salads, and somebody brings the drinks, and somebody brings charcoal. Would you say that they all brought dinner? Now, we appreciate the guy who brought charcoal, but you wouldn't say he brought dinner. You're not eating the charcoal. The charcoal is not there to actually be one of the dishes that you eat. The charcoal is there to help burn fire so that you can cook the meat, and then you eat the meat. But the meat is part of dinner. The salads are dinner. The drink is dinner. Charcoal is not dinner. The charcoal is important, but it's not the dinner. Well, the korban means the actual offering, the actual sacrifice. The wood is not a sacrifice. It's not even a side dish, right? The oil and the wine and the incense, those are like side dishes to a korban, like the condiments, like the ketchup and the mustard of the korban, so to speak. But the wood is just there to facilitate. It's not actually part of any offering. So how come the word korban is hinting to the wood when the wood isn't even an offering or even part of an offering? It's there to just facilitate or make possible the process that you have to do to the offering, which is burning it. Okay. So the question is understood? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. The story takes place in Soviet Russia at a gulag, at a Soviet prison camp where there was a very cruel guard, a very cruel commander of the prison camp, sadist, and he enjoyed torturing people. So one day he called in one of the Jewish prisoners, a Yid by the name of Reb Gedalia Moshe Goldman, who actually went on later to be the Zvila Rebbe. So he called in Reb Gedalia Moshe, and the commander says to him, "I'm ready to let you go free. All you have to do is sign your release papers." Sounds great, yeah? All you have to do is sign. But what did this sadist, what did this cruel commander do? He called Reb Gedalia Moshe in on Shabbos. So he put the papers down in front of Reb Gedalia Moshe, and Reb Gedalia Moshe says to him, "No, I'm not signing. Shabbos." So the commander says, 8 years you're going to remain here if you don't sign. You leave if you do sign. But if you don't, you're going to be here for 8 years. Reb Gedalia Moshe says, and nevertheless, I'm not going to sign. So the commander became furious. He says, what do you think you're doing? Reb Gedalia Moshe says, look, it's Shabbos. Hashem doesn't want me to break Shabbos. If Hashem wants to release me from here, He can release me without me having to break Shabbos. So I'm not really too worried about it. Hashem will release me if He wants. It doesn't depend on you. I don't need you to let me out of here. He says, by the same token, on the other hand, even if you wanted to let me out of here, and Hashem didn't want to let me out yet, so I would be stuck here. I wouldn't be able to get out even if you wanted to release me. So it really has nothing to do with you. This infuriated the commander, and he actually pulled out his gun. And at that moment, the commander's daughter walked in. And she saw what her father was about to do. And she said very calmly, very coldly, she says, "It would be a waste of a bullet." So the commander put away the gun. And he didn't kill Reb Gedalia Moshe, but he was thinking to himself, how can I harass him more? So then he called in another prisoner, another Jew who was there in the prison camp, Reb Chaim Shol Brook, a well-known mashpia. They used to call him Reb Shale. It was the nickname for Shol. They called him Shale. And Chaim was a name that was added by his bris. His name was Shol. Chaim was added later when he was sick. He got better, obviously, from that sickness and kept the name Chaim. And in Lubavitch, he was known as Reb Shale Snufsker. Reb Shale from Snufsk. So Reb Shale, the Lubavitcher Chosed, a well-known mashpia, it was a mashpia of Rabbi Elkan, soll gesund sein. They bring him into the room, and the commander says to Rabbi Gedalia Moshe, he says, here are the papers for your friend. Sign now, and he'll be released today. And if you don't, he's staying for another 8 years. So Rabbi Gedalia Moshe says, "Give me the papers." The commander says, "What's going on? A minute ago, I asked you to sign your own papers, and you refused to. Now I say to sign this other prisoner, his papers, and I say, give it right here, I'm ready to sign." Gedalia Moshe says, very simple. I'm young, I'm healthy, Baruch Hashem. I can sit here for another 8 years. But Reb Shale, I'm worried about his health. And for that, I'm ready to break Shabbos so that he can live. Well, the commander only meant it to taunt him. He meant that he wasn't serious. And he stormed off. But the end of the story is, within a few days of that story, both Reb Gedalia Moshe and Reb Shale were both released from the prison camp, and the commander was removed from his post. At any rate, that's the story. A story is a story. If you don't ask why something happened the way that it happened, that's the way it happened. But I told the story for a reason. I told it to make a point. It's a story about a sacrifice. Actually, a story of 2 sacrifices. Let's talk about them. One sacrifice was when Reb Gedalia Moshe made the choice not to sign his own release papers and to accept upon himself 8 more years in a prison camp. That was a sacrifice, a very big sacrifice. That's a sacrifice that he made to preserve the sanctity of Shabbos. And it's very noble and inspiring, and we hope that if we were in that position, God forbid, we would have such strength and courage. Certainly a sacrifice. But then there was another sacrifice. The sacrifice that he was ready to make when the commander asked him to sign Reb Shale's papers, and he says, give them here, let me sign, I'll sign right now. That was also a sacrifice. Because clearly, the fact that Reb Gedalia Moshe would rather sit in prison for 8 years than to break Shabbos means that he had an incredible sensitivity and a value and an appreciation for Shabbos. So it clearly was something important to him, and he was ready to break that in order to release Reb Sheol, which is also a sacrifice. He was ready to sacrifice his Shabbos in order to release Reb Sheol. So here's the question. They're both sacrifices. The sacrifice he was ready to make by enduring another 8 years and keeping Shabbos, or the sacrifice he was ready to make by breaking Shabbos, losing his Shabbos, in order to get his friend let out of prison. But which was a greater sacrifice? Which of the two is a bigger sacrifice? So I'll tell you like this. Sacrifice means self-sacrifice. Ultimately, all sacrifice means I'm giving up something from myself, of myself. The benefit to me that I may gain is actually a contradiction to the whole idea of sacrifice. So if there's a sacrifice that brings me some type of benefit, even a subtle benefit, even a spiritual benefit, then on some level it diminishes the degree of sacrifice. Well, in this case, if Rabbi Gedalia Moshe refused to sign the papers for himself, yes, it was a big sacrifice, but he did get to keep something. He got to keep Shabbos, which was clearly important to him. But if he signed the papers for Reb Sheol and gave up his Shabbos and didn't even gain any freedom for himself, he was only getting freedom for Reb Sheol. In other words, he would give up everything and gain nothing. That would be the ultimate sacrifice. Sacrifice means when I give everything up. I give everything, I gain nothing. So what would be the truest sacrifice? The second sacrifice, the one of signing the paper, not having Shabbos, and not even having my own freedom, only doing it for somebody else. It wasn't my intention when I wanted to tell this story, but when I started to think about it, it was impossible not to draw this connection, this parallel. People in the future may be watching this video and not understand what I'm referring to. I'm hoping even very shortly people will not know what I'm talking about right now. But today, as of right now, the week of Parshas Vayikra, Tafshin Pei, we know that the situation is that we're supposed to be quarantined right now. We're supposed to be self-isolating. And generally speaking, everybody is complying. But there are some people who think they know better. They know better than the Rabbanim. They know better than the doctors. And they want to take it upon themselves to go, they're saying they're doing it quietly. They're doing it unofficially. And they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing. And they're making minyanim. And I really hope this is not very many people at all. But I've heard reports, people have told me that it's happening, and it's very disturbing, these people who think they know better. So let me explain something very simple. Very simple. If somebody told you to choose between davening in a minyan and getting sick, and you said, I want to daven in a minyan even if I'll get sick, I might be impressed. I might think that that's sort of noble. Maybe I'd look up to you. But if you tell me you're making a decision between davening a minyan and making somebody else sick, what right do you have? You want to sacrifice your own self, your own health. That maybe it is a decision. Ask a Rav, ask a Paisik, whether you're allowed to jeopardize your own health. But to jeopardize somebody else's health, no one in the world will tell you such a thing is permitted, or that it's noble, or that it's holy. It's very simple in this situation. You're being asked to make a sacrifice, a real sacrifice. And sacrifice means you gain nothing. You gain nothing. This is not about you. This is not about your health. This is about somebody else's health. If you don't care about yourself, care about others. So, Zaya Yid, and make a sacrifice, and give up your minyan and your feeling, but it's a Chodesh, Hallel, Kriyas HaTorah. You know what? That's called sacrifice. And that's what the Eibishter wants from us. And not just to do it for ourselves, to truly do a sacrifice, to do it for somebody else, like Rebbe Gedalia Moshe was ready to do for Reb Sheil. At any rate, I hope that I'm speaking to no one. I hope that doesn't even apply to anyone right now. Let's get back to our parsha. We're asking a question: how come the word korban refers to the wood, which isn't even part of a korban? The oil, the wine, the incense, those are parts of a korban, not the main part, but they're included in the korban. They're placed on the mizbeach. They're part of the korban. The wood is not a part of the korban. So why is the word korban in Torah referring to the wood? Because the wood is more of a korban than a real korban. Because what is a korban? A korban is a sacrifice. And what is a sacrifice? When you give everything and you get nothing. The less you get out of it, the more of a true sacrifice it is. So when you give the flour or the oil or the wine, or the oil or the wine or the incense, at least it's going to be included in a korban. Okay, so you're giving it to somebody else's korban, but at least it's part of a korban, and it's going to make a reach nichayach. It's going to make a pleasing fragrance on high, which is going to cause nachas ruach lafonai shamarti v'naser etzoni. The Eibishter is going to have nachas from it. But when you give the wood isn't even part of the korban. The wood isn't part of the nachas ruach lafonai. It's just there to facilitate, to make possible the korban. And that's the ultimate korban. When you're giving and you get nothing, not even a subtle spiritual payoff. We know that the whole Parshas HaKarbonis, in the beginning of our Sedra, begins with the verse, Odom ki yakrev mikem. When a person, Odom, from you, will sacrifice. But it's not written a person from among you, a person from you. It's written a person will sacrifice from you. What does that mean? Chassidus explains that the sacrifice has to come from within you. The Ramban explains about karbonis that when you're makriv a behema, you're supposed to relate to the animal. You're supposed to empathize. You're supposed to identify with the animal. And you're supposed to actually have in mind that everything that's happening to that animal is really happening to you. So the idea of Odom ki yakriv mikem is that the person gives of himself. It's not a person who's giving something else. What are you really giving? You're giving of yourself. You're giving yourself. Now, Torah uses the word Odom. Where else do we find the word Odom in Torah? Ki Odom eitz hasodeh. Parsha Shoftim talks about Bal Tashchis, about not destroying fruit-bearing trees when you go out to war. But the Torah says, Ki Odom eitz hasodeh, that a person is the tree of the field. So, here a vort. When is it the true Odom ki yakriv mikem? When is it that your sacrifice is really, truly, not just giving something that you own, but giving yourself, true self-sacrifice, true giving yourself away, giving away the Odom himself? Ki Odom eitz hasodeh. When you're giving the eitz, when you donate the wood. Because from the wood isn't even part of the korban, which makes it, ironically, the ultimate korban. The ultimate giving is when you give it all away. You're not part of the glory. You're not part of the fanfare. You're not part of a minyan. You're not part of Kriyas HaTorah. You don't get to say Hallel with a chazan. Why? So somebody else could benefit. It's not even for you to benefit. True selflessness. And that's Yiddishkeit. That's karbonis. Korban is from the word kiruv, to become close, to come close to Hashem. How do you become close to Hashem? You don't come close to Hashem by being a yesh, by being an ego, ego, edging God out. You come close to Hashem by being nothing, by being selfless, by giving everything and gaining nothing. We should have in mind, at least to emulate, at least a little bit, the true selflessness of a Likkutei Yid, like Rebbe Gedalia Moshe, and Even if we can't be on the level, at least to have that in mind, have that as the goal. What's true Yiddishkeit? True Yiddishkeit is when you gain nothing, not even the spiritual satisfaction of being part of the Nachas Ruach Lafanei Sha'amarti V'Naser Etzaini. Not even being part of that. That's Yiddishkeit. That's holiness. That's self-sacrifice. We should live that, or at least try to live it. The Eibusher should help.